Just need to get this link out. All right. Today our topic will be Pythagorean mathematics. It's a pretty deep topic. I would probably just stick close to the text here because there's a lot of details to it. This is again The Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly Palmer Hall, and it is one of the master works of, you could say, American Masonic type literature. So this is a lot of mystery school heritage or secret schools teachings. I'm going to be watching that the sun doesn't cross over this. So, we covered last time the life and philosophy of Pythagoras, and so that video is chapter 10. If you want to hear more narrative about his life rather than his mathematical teachings, go back to that video. This one is going to focus a lot on math and the numerology and the meanings that that numbers can give to words, or words can be ways in which words can be numerically analyzed, like in Hebrew Gematria. There's a Greek version of the same thing. I believe it's called isopathy or something like that, and it's essentially that each letter of the alphabet has a numerical value. The Gematria meanings in Hebrew are definitely an essential Kabbalah topic. If you want to discuss Kabbalah, then the Gematria values are very important to take a look at, and that outlines some of the secret meanings of the Bible. So, Pythagorean mathematics. Concerning the secret significance of numbers, there has been much speculation. Though many interesting discoveries have been made, it may be safely said that with the death of Pythagoras, the great key to this science was lost. It may have been, but a lot of things that are attributed to Pythagoras may or may not have actually had anything to do with him, but they definitely had something to do with his school and at least his students. For nearly 2,500 years, philosophers of all nations have attempted to unravel the Pythagorean skein, but apparently none has been successful. Notwithstanding attempts made to obliterate all records of the teachings of Pythagoras, fragments have survived which give clues to some of the simpler parts of his philosophy. The major secrets were never committed to writing, but were communicated orally to a few chosen disciples. These apparently dated. They apparently did not divulge their secrets to the profane, the result being that when death sealed their lips, the arcana died with them. That is definitely a fear of mine, that the secrets don't exist out there, but I'm also kind of inclined to believe that they have been passed down. They've just been I mean, one of the requirements of the Pythagorean school was to be silent for an entire year before you could be initiated, in order to prove that you could keep secrets. So people like that don't necessarily spill their secrets, but maybe they still have people that they teach. Certain of the secret schools in the world today are perpetuations of the ancient mysteries, and although it is quite possible that they may possess some of the original numerical formulae, there is no evidence of it in the voluminous writings which have issued from these groups during the last 500 years. These writings, while frequently discussing Pythagoras, show no indication of a more complete knowledge of his intricate doctrines than the post-Pythagorean Greek speculators had, who talked much, wrote little, knew less, and concealed their ignorance under a series of mysterious hints and promises. Here and there among the literary products of early writers are found enigmatic statements which they made no effort to interpret. The following example is quoted from Plutarch. The Pythagoreans indeed go further than this, and honor even numbers and geometrical diagrams with the names and the titles of the gods. Thus, they call the equilateral triangle head-born Minerva and Tritogenia, because it may be equally divided by 3 perpendiculars drawn from each of the angles. So, the unit they term Apollo, as to the number 2, they have affixed the name of strife. So the unit they term Apollo, and as to the number 2, they have affixed the name of strife and audaciousness, to that of 3 of justice. For as doing an injury is an extreme of one side, and suffering one is the extreme of the other side, and suffering in the middle between them. And suffering an injury is an extreme on the other side, and just suffering, plain suffering, is in the middle. In like manner, the number 36, their tetractys, or sacred quaternion, being composed of the first 4 odd numbers added to the first 4 even ones, as is commonly reported, is looked upon by them as the most solemn oath they can take, and called Cosmos. This from the book Isis and Osiris. Earlier in the same work, Plutarch also notes, for as the power of the triangle is expressive of the power of Pluto, Bacchus, and Mars, and the properties of the square of Rhea, Venus, Ceres, Vesta, and Juno, of the dodecahedron of Jupiter, so we are informed by Eudoxus, is the figure of 56 angles expressive of the nature of Typhon, Typhon being the serpent. Plutarch did not pretend to explain the inner significance of the symbols, but believed that the relationship which Pythagoras established between the geometrical solids and the gods was the result of images the great sage had seen in the Egyptian temples. Plato also talks some about the geometrical solids, and we discussed it a little bit in the last chapter. Albert Pike, the great Masonic symbolist, admitted that there were many points concerning which he could not secure reliable information. In his Symbolism, for the 32nd and 33rd degree, he wrote, I do not understand why the 7 should be called Minerva, or the cube Neptune. Further on, he added, undoubtedly the names given by the Pythagoreans to the different numbers were themselves enigmatical and symbolic, and there is little doubt that in the time of Plutarch, the meaning these names concealed were lost. Pythagoras has succeeded too well in concealing his symbols with a veil that was from the first impenetrable, without his oral explanation. That's the case with a lot of Twilight language documents, as they're written in a language that you need a master to interpret for you. Basically, it can only be properly interpreted by someone who already knows the secret, and by that it is concealed. And that's a common thing that you see in Tibetan tantric documents, for example, or other kinds of monastic initiatory kind of things that require students to study for many years before they're allowed to discover the secrets. That kind of thing is also common today, or commonly imitated by many kinds of cult. And one of the things that, for example, the FBI uses to determine whether something is a cult or not is whether they have secret levels of initiation. The more likely, or the more that they do, the more likely they are to be an abusive cult of some kind. But anyway, but that's the FBI's opinion about it. In this case, what's interesting here is he says that the cube, Albert Pike, he's quoting Albert Pike, and undoubtedly this is, it says Albert Pike's Symbolism. He says that the cube is Neptune. You have all these people who are on the kick of the cube being Saturn, but there's really not very much indication of that pre-modern. You can't really find explanations of that, of Saturn and the cube that predate really the picture they took of the hexagon pole of Saturn. The hexagonal pole was a fairly recent discovery, and mostly people may have known about the black cube, but they weren't necessarily comparing it to Saturn, because they would talk about the Kaaba being in Mecca being a black cube, and the tefillin that are worn by Jews on the wrist and on the forehead are little black boxes that contain phrases from the Torah. It's interesting that the cube here is related to Neptune, because that's not mostly what you hear these days, where people are relating the cube specifically to Saturn, maybe because of some kind of function of time. Saturn is also called Chronos, so time. This uncertainty, shared by all true students of the subject, proves conclusively that it is unwise to make definite statements founded on the indefinite and fragmentary information available concerning the Pythagorean system of mathematical philosophy. The material which follows represents an effort to collect a few salient points from the scattered records preserved by disciples of Pythagoras and others who have since contacted his philosophy. Method of securing the numerical power of words. This will be about Gematria. The first step in obtaining the numerical value of a word is to resolve it back into its original tongue. Only words of Greek or Hebrew derivation can be successfully analyzed by this method, and all words must be spelled in their most ancient and complete forms. Old Testament words and names, therefore, must be translated back into the early Hebrew characters, and New Testament words into Greek. Two examples will help to clarify this principle. The demiurgus of the Jews is called in English Jehovah, but when seeking the numerical value of the name Jehovah, it is necessary to resolve the name into the Hebrew letters, where it becomes Yod He Wah He, or Yahweh, and is read from right to left. The Hebrew letters are He, Vav, He, Yod, Yod, He, Wah, He. By consulting the foregoing table of letter values, it is found that the four characters of this sacred name have the following numerical significance. Yod equals 10, He equals 5, Vav equals 6, and He equals 5. Therefore, 26, the number 26, 10 plus 5 plus 6 plus 5, is a synonym of Jehovah. If the English letters were used, this answer would obviously not be correct. Sometimes I wonder, though, if a gematria is functional in every language, but it works somehow differently. In English, we don't really have an old system of counting we've used Arabic numerals basically for the whole modern history of English. For quite a long time, anyway. Maybe there was a time that they used Latin numerals before before Arabic ones. But in many old cultures, it was common to just use letters for both numbers and also for letters. So he was just mentioning this chart. I will put this back on normal. Let me make sure that I can see this chart. You guys can see it. So this is the numerical values of different letters and different alphabets. So most languages that count this way go up in a sequence that's somewhat like this, which is to say it goes 1 through 9 or 0 through 9, and then it will go 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. It will go up in tens, and then it will go up in hundreds. So as you can see here, the Hebrew actually only goes up to 400, and that's because there's only 22 letters of Hebrew, and then that's interesting that the Greek doesn't have. I'm not sure what column 6 is. Well, in any case, you can use this table in order to, and actually you can put English up on a table with this kind of significance, in which case we would count, I guess, to 7, or I guess we would count to 800 in English, and then there would, we have 26 letters. How many letters were in Greek? $27. Yeah, so I guess we would just have one extra letter, or we would include sanpi, just write something like that. But that's what he was just referring to. So the second example is the mysterious Gnostic pantheos Abraxas. For this name, the Greek table is used. Abraxas in Greek is Abraxas. Alpha equals 1, beta equals 2. Then rho is 100. Alpha is 1. Chi is 60. Alpha is 1. And lowercase s, sigma, is 200. The sum being 365, the number of days in the year. The number furnishes the key to the mystery of Abraxas, who is symbolic of the 365 aeons, or spirits of the days, gathered together in one composite personality. Abraxas is symbolic of 5 creatures, and as the circle of the year actually consists of 360 degrees, each of the emanating deities is 1/5 of this power, or 72, one of the most sacred numbers in the Old Testament of the Jews. The 72-letter name of God is said to be the most secret and most powerful name of God. Only great wise men were said to know the 72-letter name. Our friend Atma, the other day, he posted a joke one. It was in the chat for the last episode, I believe. It was just 72 letters of just fun sounds. So this same, so 72 is one of the most sacred numbers in the Old Testament of the Jews and in their Kabbalistic system. The same method is used in finding the numerical value of the names of gods and goddesses of the Greeks and the Jews. And I mean, you can find numerical value of all words. For example, there's Gematrix. I don't know if that. There's like Gematrix, which is a Gematria calculator. So you go here and you say Yeshua for. Actually, so it shouldn't. Well, you'd have to actually change your. You'd have to change it to, because it's not. It's a shin. It's one shin. It's not an S and an H. So their calculation would be different. 985. Find the zodiac proof. It's the exact same numbers as Jesus. Oh, bring order out of chaos. You found me. No, God is alive. Hello, me, God. I hate Quentin. God is alive in a life. Eric John Red Pill. Yeah, well, anyway, let's see if what would be a. Does it calculate Hebrew? Will it calculate actual Hebrew? Okay, yeah, so 26. It's the same as add each. So this Gematria calculator is more aimed at, it's more kind of fun. There are Jewish Gematria, and so there are Hebrew Gematria and Greek Gematria, which I believe is called Isophi or something like that. Isopsephy. Okay. Yeah, it's a very interesting thing, and you can go through like the New Testament. You can substitute words based on ones that are the same substitution. There was an interesting one I remember about the ladder of Jacob Gematria. It has a very similar so this says it here, that the Gematria of the word Sinai, the mountain that Moses climbed and received and met God and talked to God, though in other passages it's said to be Mount Horeb. The Torah says both in different places. So that is one of the known contradictions. But so the word Sinai is the same as the word Sulam, which is, Sulam equals Sinai equals temple equals throne of glory. So Sulam is the ladder that that Jacob climbed to heaven, and Sinai is the mountain that Moses climbed to meet God and talk to him in person and receive the book of the law. So in Kabbalah study of the Torah, when you see that Jacob's ladder is connected to to the mountain that Moses climbed, there's a mystical connection there. That's the idea behind Gematria with regard to using it in the Bible or using it. It's one of those things that's used heavily when people are mystically analyzing the Bible. It's not necessarily surface level stuff. There's a style, a literary style called Pardes, which is to different layers of meaning that are written in the Torah. You have your surface level meaning, and then you have like your allegorical meaning, and then you have your symbolic meaning, and you have a mystical meaning. They're all one layered on top of each other, and every passage has multiple meanings, and has multiple significances on different layers. And that's one of the characteristics that separates Scripture from just your regular prose. Is that when Scripture is one of the features of Scripture that would separate it from a history book, is that a history book, if you were to write a textbook on history, every sentence would be intended to have one clear meaning, so that someone could read the book and have an accurate picture of history. But the Bible is not supposed to be like that. It is not written that every sentence has a very clear meaning, one very clear meaning. It's written so that every sentence is rich and full of meaning on many, many different levels. And that's what distinguishes the genre of Scripture. So the Torah and the Bible, or the Ketuvim, Nevi'im, and then the New Testament. And then when you read Tao Te Ching or sutras, some of the Buddhist sutras are some of them are more accounts, meant to be more literal accounts, and some of them, but most of them have layers of meanings, and they have various messages that you can take out of any section. So that's for example, when people ask me, is the Book of Mormon Scripture? I say that absolutely it falls into the category of scriptures, because it's the text is written in such a way that everything that's in there is of layered meaning or complex meaning. Sentences are not necessarily written for just one purpose, and there are things in the Book of Mormon that are numerical weird things, especially with page numbers. The Book of Mormon has this thing about page numbers, and I remember that, for example, the page 238. So a lot of Mormons were Masons, Freemasons, or Rosicrucians. And so the number 2, so Rosicrucians and Freemasons both have ties back to this Pythagorean school. And in fact, there are many, many Pythagorean aspects to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But I think of this page 238 of the Book of Mormon because it 2 to the power of 3 equals 8, which is something that is later on in this chapter is discussed. And so this has an interesting passage on it with the how to receive Scripture. And I think it says, and now Alma began to expound these things unto him, saying, it is given unto many to know the mysteries of God. Nevertheless, they are laid under a strict command, that they shall not impart only to the portion of his word which he doth grant unto the children of men, according to the heed and diligence which they give unto him. And therefore he that will harden his heart, the same receiveth the lesser portion of the word, and he that will not harden his heart, to him is given the greater portion of the word, until it is given unto him to know the mysteries of God, until he know them in full. And they that will harden their hearts, to them is given the lesser portion of the word, until they know nothing concerning his mysteries. And then they are taken captive by the devil, and led down by his will down to destruction. Now this is what is meant by being caught into the chains of hell. But the significance of it being on page 238 is 238, 2 to the power of 3 equals 8, is one of those Masonic numerically significant numbers for that reason. And on this page it's specifically saying that if someone hardens their heart, they won't understand the deep meanings of this scripture. But if they soften their heart, then the mysteries of God will be revealed to them. So the numerical meaning, you start going through the Book of Mormon with this understanding that there is some deeper meaning. You can start to make these mathematical calculations on the page numbers and on the passage numbers and things like that. And I guess what I'll say to you is that the whole it's like the whole Book of Mormon is written in a Rosicrucian cipher, and it's a very it's brilliant, really, but it's there's a lot more there than is on the surface. So people have to study it a lot, and people do. People dedicate a lot of time to studying the Book of Mormon because it's not what's there is not necessarily the surface. In any case, that is true of many mystery type schools. And again, some people consider the Mormons to be a cult. Like we were talking about up above, that I think that today, if Pythagoreans were around today, people would most likely think of them as a cult because they had strict policies of initiation and things like that. And so their teachings could very well have been true, but people would say that, if you have to sit around in silence for a year before they even let you come in because they want you to keep their secrets, maybe they're an abusive cult. I think that's what most people today would think. So all higher numbers can be reduced to one of the original 10 numerals, and the 10 can be reduced itself to 1. 1 plus 0 is 1. Therefore, all groups of numbers resulting from the translation of the names of deities into their numerical equivalents have a basis in one of the first 10 numbers. By this system, in which the digits are added together, 666 becomes 6 plus 6 plus 6, or 18, and this in turn becomes 1 plus 8, or 9. According to Revelation, 144,000 are to be saved, so 1 plus 4 plus 4 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0 equals 9, thus proving that both the beast of Babylon and the number of the saved refer to man himself, whose symbol is the number 9. This system can be used successfully with both Greek and Hebrew letter values. The original Pythagorean system of numerical philosophy contains nothing to justify the practice now in vogue of changing the given name or surname in the hope of improving the temperament or financial condition by altering the name vibrations. Though that is something that I heard from a Kabbalah teacher, was that if someone is very, very sick on their deathbed, or if they're just in the hospital sick, one thing that is often prescribed to them by Kabbalah rabbis is to change their name or adopt a new name, because adopting the new name will change their vibration and will change their fate. So I always thought that was an interesting idea, that by changing your name you could change your fate. I mean, there are reasons like this that I use the name Lex instead of the name Alex. For example, Lex means law, and Alex would thus mean lawless, because in many Proto-Indo-European languages, the prefix a it means the opposite of, or to be not something. So Alex would be to be without law. It's not proper Latin necessarily, but it's more of a Greek or other Proto-Indo-European language thing. But I always thought that it had some significance, so I chose to be Lex instead, because people wouldn't call me Alexander. It's too long. So the original, okay. There is also a system of calculation in vogue for the English language, but its accuracy is a matter of legitimate dispute. And actually, I still feel that way. I'm not sure that English Gematria works properly. Just like if you go to that Gematrix site, English Gematria does not seem to work as well as Greek and Hebrew Gematria do. It is comparatively modern and has no relationship either to the Hebrew Kabbalistic system or to the Greek procedure. The claim has been made by some that it is Pythagorean, is not supported by any tangible evidence, and there are many reasons why such a contention is untenable. The fact that Pythagoras used 10 as the basis of calculation, while this system uses 9, an imperfect number, is in itself almost conclusive. Furthermore, the arrangement of the Greek and Hebrew letters does not agree closely enough with the English to permit the application of the number sequences of one language to the number sequences of the others. Further experimentation with the system may prove profitable, but it is without basis in antiquity. So, just to look quickly back at this, it had the list of what all these things were. It has the name of the Hebrew letters, then the Sumerian letters. Okay, so these are the names of the Hebrew. Then these are the Samaritan letters. And then these are the Hebrew letters. Their numerical values. And the Greek letters. Then what is 6 supposed to be? The letters marked with asterisks are brought to Greece from Phoenicia by Cadmus. Okay. So these are the Phoenician letters. And that is why almost all of them overlap with the Hebrew. Phoenician was very similar. Well, I mean, Phoenician and Proto-Canaanite was really the mother language of all the Western writing systems, and then from before that it was Egyptian. And our letter M comes straight from ancient Egyptian through a very roundabout route, but the Egyptian system of hieroglyphics became a shorthand hieratic system that became kind of like a cursive, and then that was derived into a Proto-Canaanite language, which gave rise to Phoenician, which was then a root of Greek and Latin, and later that Greek would be a root for Cyrillic, and the Proto-Canaanite was also a parent of Hebrew and Arabic and Aramaic, and all of those actually adopted this modern system of Hebrew writing is actually derived from Babylonian or Akkadian Aramaic. That is derived from Proto-Canaanite writing system. That's interesting. So when used at the end of the word, the Hebrew tau has the numerical value of 440 instead of 400, because I believe its normal value is 400. Kaf is 500, Mem 600, Nun 700, Pe 800, Sadi 900. Dotted alpha and a dashed aleph have the value of 1,000. So, oh, there you go. This is the one for English he was talking about. So the letters under each of the numbers have the value of the figure at the top of the column. Thus the word man, 415, is a total of 10. The funny thing about this is that essentially we actually use something almost exactly like that. We just use it on the phone. When we have our phone pad, it has the letters next to numbers, and that that system, it's actually just an eight number system, because we go 2 through 9. But so there's Gematria. There's a Gematria-like calculation that you could make based on, and lots of people do that. And I mean, you could see it on like 1-800-CASH NOW or whatever. They'll or things like that. They use the phone system of Gematria to essentially replace numbers with letters. And so that's a Gematria system that we use all the time, and we don't even think about it as a Gematria system or a system of mystical value. It could be. You could take a look at it. Could be interesting to see. So, an introduction to the Pythagorean theory of numbers. The following outline of Pythagorean mathematics is a paraphrase of the opening chapters of Thomas Taylor's Theoretic Arithmetic, the rarest and most important compilation of Pythagorean mathematical fragments extant. The Pythagoreans declared arithmetic to be the mother of the mathematical sciences. This is proved by the fact that geometry, music, and astronomy are dependent upon it, but it is not dependent upon them. Thus, geometry may be removed, but arithmetic will remain. But if arithmetic is removed, then geometry is eliminated. In the same manner, music depends upon arithmetic, but the elimination of music affects arithmetic only by limiting one of the expressions. The Pythagoreans also demonstrated arithmetic to be prior to astronomy, for the latter is dependent upon both geometry and music. The size, form, and motion of the celestial bodies is determined by the use of geometry, their harmony and rhythm by the use of music. If astronomy be removed, neither geometry nor music is injured, but if geometry and music be eliminated, astronomy is destroyed. The priority of both geometry and music to astronomy is therefore established. Arithmetic, however, is prior to all. It is primary and fundamental. Pythagoras instructed his disciples that the science of mathematics is divided into two major parts. The first is concerned with the multitude or the constituent parts of the thing, and the second is concerned with magnitude or the relative size or density of a thing. Magnitude is divided into two parts, magnitude which is stationary and magnitude which is movable. The stationary part having priority. The multitude is also divided into two parts, for it is related both to itself and to other things, and the first relationship having priority, its relationship to itself. Pythagoras assigned the science of arithmetic to multitude related to itself, and the art of music to multitude related to other things. Geometry likewise was assigned to stationary magnitude, and spherics, used partly in the sense of astronomy, to movable magnitude. Both multitude and magnitude were circumscribed by the circumference of the mind. The atomic theory has proved size to be the result of number, for a mass is made up of minute units, though mistaken by the uninformed for a single simple substance. Owing to the fragmentary condition of existing Pythagorean records, it is difficult to arrive at exact definitions of terms. Before it is possible, however, to unfold the subject further, some light must he cast upon the meanings of the words number, monad, and one. The monad signifies the all-including one. The Pythagoreans called the monad the noble number, sire of gods and men. The monad also signifies the sum of any combination of numbers considered as whole. Thus, the universe is considered as a monad, but the individual parts of the universe, such as the planets and elements, are monads in relation to the parts of which they themselves are composed, though they in turn are parts of the greater monad formed of their sum. The monad may also be likened, to the seed of a tree, which, when it has grown, has many branches, which are the numbers. In other words, the numbers are to the monad what the branches of trees are to the seed of the tree. From the study of the mysterious Pythagorean monad, Leibniz evolved his magnificent theory of the world atoms, a theory in perfect accord with the ancient teachings of the mysteries. For Leibniz himself was an initiate of a secret school. I believe it because he created binary mathematics through I Ching, the ancient Chinese philosophy. By some Pythagoreans, the monad is also considered D, synonymous with the one. This is also related and became very popular among the later Islamic world during the Golden Era, and because it's very closely related to a Arabic and Islamic principle called Tawhid, which means oneness. Tawhid. So, number is the term applied to all numerals and their combinations. A strict interpretation of the term number by certain of the Pythagoreans excludes the numbers 1 and 2 from being numbers. Pythagoras defines number to be the extension and energy of the spermatic reasons contained in the monad. The followers of Hippasus declared number to be the first pattern used by the demiurgus in the formation of the universe. And actually in the Sefer Yetzirah of the Kabbalah schools, whose origin is disputed, but it's a very old document at least. The very first verse of it says that God created. This is later in the first verse. It says that God created things through Sipper, Sephar, and Sefer, meaning numbers, text, and dialogue, communication. And those are the roots of creation that God used. He had quantity, and communication. Quantity, quality, and communication. Yes. The one was defined by the Platonists as the summit of the many. The one differs from the monad in that the term monad is used to designate the sum of the parts considered as a unit, whereas the one is the term applied to each of its integral parts. There are two orders of number, the odd and the even. Because unity, or one, always remains indivisible, the odd number cannot be divided equally. Thus 9 is 4 plus 1 plus 4, the unity in the center being indivisible. Furthermore, if any odd number is divided into two parts, one part will always be odd and the other even. Thus 9 may be 5 plus 4, 3 plus 6, 7 plus 2, or 8 plus 1, all of them the combination of an odd number with an even number. The Pythagoreans considered the odd number, of which the monad was the prototype, to be definite and masculine. This is also true in the Chinese system of I Ching, where the numbers 7 and 9 are yang and the numbers 6 and 8 are yin. They were not all agreed, however, as to the nature of unity, or one. Some declared it to be positive because if added to an even negative number, it produces an odd positive number. Others demonstrated that if unity be added to an odd number, the latter becomes even, thereby making the masculine to be feminine. Unity, or one, therefore, was considered an androgynous number, partaking of both the masculine and feminine attributes. Just like in Genesis, it says, in Genesis 1:27, it says that Elohim created Ha'adam, mankind, in his image. Male and female, Elohim created them. Meaning that God's image is both male and female. So the one must necessarily be androgynous. That's also concluded here by this mathematical reasoning. For this reason, the Pythagoreans called it the evenly odd. because 1 was considered to partake both of masculine and feminine attributes and was thus both odd and even, so it was evenly odd. It was customary for the Pythagoreans to offer sacrifices of an uneven number of objects to the superior gods, while to the goddesses and subterranean spirits, an even number was offered. Any even number may be divided into 2 equal parts, which are always either both odd or both even. Thus, 10 by equal division gives 5 plus 5, both odd numbers. The same principle holds true if the 10 be unequally divided. For example, in 6 plus 4, both parts are even. In 7 plus 3, both parts are odd. In 8 plus 2, both parts are again even. And in 9 plus 1, both parts are again odd. Thus, in the even number, however it may be divided, the parts will always be both odd or both even. The Pythagoreans considered the even number of, which the duad was the prototype, to be indefinite and feminine. The even number, of which the duad was the prototype, even number, to be feminine. Thus you get the trinity, the 1 plus 2. The odd numbers are divided by a mathematical contrivance called the sieve of Eratosthenes into 3 general classes: incomposite, composite, and incomposite composite. This is fun. It's like being back in math class. The incomposite numbers are those which have no divisor other than themselves and unity, such as 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17, 19, 23, 29, 31, 37, 41, 43, 47, and so forth. For example, 7 is divisible only by 7, which goes into itself once, and unity, which goes into it 7 times. So incomposite numbers are essentially prime numbers, I guess. The composite numbers are those which are divisible not only by themselves and unity, but also by some other number, such as 9, which is divisible by 1, 3, and 9, or 21, which is divisible not only by itself and by unity, but also by 3 and 7. The incomposite composite numbers are those which have no common divisor, although each of itself is capable of division, such as 9 and 25. Oh, okay, so that's... Okay. So, for example, 9 is divisible by 3 and 25 by 5, but neither is divisible by the divisor of the other. Thus, they have no common divisor. Because they have individual divisors, they are called composite. And because they have no common divisor, they are called incomposite. Accordingly, the term incomposite composite was described to describe their properties. That's strange. It's an interesting. It's interesting to think so deeply about numbers in basic arithmetic, because it's so rare that we actually see this kind of thinking being taught. Even numbers can be divided into 3 classes, which are the evenly even, the evenly odd, and the oddly odd. I love the terminology. The evenly even numbers are all in duple ratio from unity, thus 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 512, and 1024. Those should all be very familiar numbers to people who are familiar with computers. They're all in duple ratio. Their proof of the perfect evenly even number is that it can be halved, and the halves can be halved again back to unity. So it has to be some multiple of 2. 2 to the power of something. 2 to the power of 0 is 1. 2 to the power of 1 is 2. 2 to the power of 2 is 4. 2 to the power of 3 is 8. 2 to the power of 4 is 16, etc. Those are also basic structures that are found in the first chapter of Genesis. There are 32 sayings of God, that 32 times God, the name Elohim is mentioned. And 10 of them are sayings, which are the creations. And then there are the 12 other sayings, and then let's see. I forget exactly how it breaks down, but there's I guess there's the three mothers and well, I don't know. It's a very interesting. It basically there's 22 letters and 10 numbers. There's 22 letters and 10 numbers. So there's the 10 numbers that are the 10 times God says something. Then there's the three mothers, and then there's the 7 doubles and the 12 elementals, which are the 22 letters of Hebrew, and that's each one of them is assigned to one of the 32 times that God's name is mentioned in Genesis 1. So you can kind of see this is the kind of math that was common. It was common even in the Bible, going back to the very first chapter of Genesis. So if you can learn to think in this way, which is not necessarily the easiest thing to do, because it's a very it is a natural way to think in a certain sense, but we're just not taught this way, and in a way we're taught a lot less good of a way. So the evenly even numbers, as we were saying, they're basically powers of 2. The evenly even numbers possess certain unique properties. The sum of any number of terms, but the last term, is always equal to the last term minus 1. For example, the sum of the first and second terms equals the third term minus 1. So 1 plus 2 is 1 less than 4. 1 plus 2 is 3. Or the sum of the first, second, third, and fourth terms, 1 plus 2 plus 4 plus 8, equals the fifth term, 16 minus 1. See, that's just something that you don't hear people talk about. You ever hear someone say that in a bar? I'm gonna buy him a drink and give him a Daniel Webster cigar. I just want to hear some guy in a bar just well, the evenly even numbers, they possess to have certain unique properties, and the sum of the number of terms is always any number of terms is always the same, but the last term is always equal to the last term minus 1. Buy that guy a drink, man. He would need one. Anyway, in a series of evenly even numbers, the first multiplied by the last equals the last. The second multiplied by the second from the last equals the last. And so on until in an odd series, one number remains, which multiplied by itself equals the last number of the series. Or in an even series, 2 numbers remain, which multiplied by each other give the last number of the series. For example, 1 plus 2, or 1, 2, 4, 8, 16 is an odd series. The first number multiplied by the last number equals the last number. The second number multiplied by the second from the last number, 2 times 8, equals the last number, 16. Being an odd series, the 4 is left in the center, and when this is multiplied by itself, also equals the last number, 16. That's pretty cool. The evenly odd numbers are those which, when halved, are incapable of further division by halving. These are formed by taking the odd numbers in sequential order and multiplying them by 2. By this process, the odd numbers 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11 produce the evenly odd numbers 2, 6, 10, 14, 18, 22. Thus, every fourth number is evenly odd. Each of the even-odd numbers may be divided once as 2, which becomes 2 ones and cannot be divided further, or 6, which becomes 2 threes and cannot be divided further. It's interesting because I apply a lot of this stuff in tarot. I apply this stuff in tarot readings a lot. for numerological significance of the cards. Another peculiarity of the evenly odd numbers is that if the divisor be odd, the quotient is always even. And if the divisor be even, the quotient is always odd. For example, if 18 be divided by 2, which is an even divisor, the quotient is 9, which is an odd number. If 18 be divided by 3, an odd divisor, the quotient is 6, an even number. The evenly odd numbers are also remarkable in that each term is 1/2 of the sum of the terms on either side of it. For example, 10 is 1/2 of the sums of 6 and 14, which is 20 divided by 2, 10. 18 is 1/2 the sum of 14 and 22. 36 divided by 2 is 18. 6 is 1/2 the sum of 2 and 10. 12 divided by 2. The sieve of Eratosthenes. Sieve of Eratosthenes. Redrawn from Taylor's Theoretic Arithmetic. So this shows how composite numbers are derived, it looks like. The sieve is a mathematical device originated by Eratosthenes around 230 BC for the purpose of segregating the composite and incomposite numbers. For segregating the composite and incomposite odd numbers. Its use is extremely simple after the theory has once been mastered. All the odd numbers are first arranged in their natural order, as shown in the second panel from the bottom, designated odd numbers. It will then be seen that every third number beginning with 3 is divisible by 3, every fifth number beginning with 5 is divisible by 5, every seventh number beginning with 7 is divisible by 7, every ninth number beginning with 9 is divisible by 9, every 11th number beginning with 11 is divisible by 11, and so on into infinity. This system finally sifts out what the Pythagoreans call the incomposite numbers, or those having no divisor other than themselves in unity. These will be found in the lowest panel, designated primary and incomposite numbers. In his History of Mathematics, David Eugene Smith states that Eratosthenes was one of the greatest scholars of Alexandria, and was called by his admirers the second Plato. Eratosthenes was educated at Athens, and is renowned not only for his sieve, but for having computed, by a very ingenious method, the circumference and diameter of the earth. Yes, I recall that being written about quite early on. His estimate of Earth's diameter was only 50 miles less than the polar diameter accepted by modern scientists. This and other mathematical achievements of Eratosthenes are indisputable evidence that in the 3rd century before Christ, the Greeks not only knew the Earth to be spherical in form, but could also approximate with amazing accuracy its actual size and distance from both the sun and the moon. Aristarchus of Samos, another great Greek astronomer and mathematician who lived about 250 BC, established by philosophical deduction and a few simple scientific instruments that the Earth revolved around the sun. While Copernicus actually believed himself to be the discoverer of this fact, he but restating the findings advanced by Aristarchus 1700 years earlier. I always think that stuff's interesting. A lot of those types of texts were destroyed in the fires of the Library of Alexandria. Julius Caesar accidentally set it on fire while putting under siege in Alexandria. And then Diocletian had Alexandria under siege and burnt it down. Probably not accidentally. Them's the breaks. So, the oddly odd or unevenly even numbers are a composite between evenly even and the evenly odd numbers. Unlike the evenly even, they cannot be halved back to unity, and unlike the evenly odd, they are capable of more than one division by halving. The oddly odd numbers are formed by multiplying the evenly even numbers above 2 by the odd numbers above 1. The odd numbers above 1 are 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, and so forth. The evenly even numbers above 2 are 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, and so on. The first odd number of the series, 3, multiplied by 4, the first evenly even number of the series, gives 12, the first oddly odd number. By multiplying 5, 7, 9, 11, and so forth by 4, oddly odd numbers are found. The other oddly odd numbers are produced by multiplying 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, and so forth, in turn, by the other evenly even numbers, 8, 16, 32, 64, and so forth. An example of the halving of the oddly odd numbers is as follows. 1/2 of 12 equals 6. 1/2 of 6 is 3, which cannot be halved further because Pythagoras did not divide unity. Even numbers are also divided into three other classes: superperfect, deficient, and perfect. Superperfect or superabundant numbers are such as have the sum of their fractional parts greater than themselves. 1/2 of 24 is 12. 1/4 is 6. 1/3 is 8. 1/6 is 4. 1/12 is 2. 1/24 is 1. The sum of these parts is 33, which is in excess of 24, the original number. That one should be notable to everyone because it produces the number 33. So this is probably a hint about some Masonic numbers. Deficient numbers are such as have the sum of their fractional parts less than themselves. For example, 1/2 of 14 equals 7, 1/7 equals 2, and 1/14 equals 1. The sum of these numbers, 7 plus 2 plus 1, is 10, which is less than 14, the original number. Perfect numbers are such as have the sum of their fractional parts equal to themselves. 1/2 of 28 is 14, 1/4 is 7, 1/7 is 4, 1/14 is 2, 1/28 is 1. The sum of these parts, 14 plus 7 plus 4 plus 2 plus 1, is equal to 28. The perfect numbers are extremely rare. There is only one between 1 and 10, which is 6. One between 10 and 100, namely 28. One between 100 and 1,000, namely 496. And only one between 1,000 and 10,000, namely 8,128. The perfect numbers are found by the following rule. The first number of the evenly even series of numbers, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, and so forth, is added to the second number of the series, and if an incomposite number results, it is multiplied by the last number of the series of evenly even numbers whose sum produced it. The product is the first perfect number. For example, the first and second evenly even numbers are 1 and 2. Their sum is 3, an incomposite number, and if 3 is multiplied by 2, which is the last number of the series of evenly even numbers that was used to produce it, the product is 6, the first perfect number. If the addition of the evenly even numbers does not result in an incomposite number, the next evenly even number of the series must be added until an incomposite number results. Incomposite being a prime. The second perfect number is found in the following manner. The sum of the evenly even numbers 1, 2, and 4 is 7, an incomposite number. If 7 be multiplied by 4, the last of the series of evenly even numbers used to produce it, the product is 28, the second perfect number. This method of calculation may be continued to infinity. Perfect numbers, when multiplied by 2, produce superabundant numbers, and when divided by 2, produce deficient numbers. The Pythagoreans evolved their philosophy from the science of numbers. The following quotation from Theoretic Arithmetic is an excellent example of this practice. Perfect numbers, therefore, are beautiful images of the virtues which are certain media between excess and defect, and are not summits, as by some of the ancients they were supposed to be. And evil indeed is opposed to evil, but both are opposed to one good. Good, however, is never opposed to good, but to two evils at one and the same time. Thus, timidity is opposed to audacity, to both of which the want of true courage is common. But both timidity and audacity are opposed to fortitude. Craft also is opposed to fatuity, to both of which the want of intellect is common. and both these are opposed to prudence. Thus, too, profusion is opposed to avarice, to both of which illiberality is common, and both these are opposed to liberality, and in a similar manner in the other virtues, by all of which it is evident that perfect numbers have a great similitude of the virtues. That's pretty cool. But they also resemble the virtues on another account, for they are rarely found as being few, and they are generated in a very constant order. On the contrary, an infinite multitude of superabundant and diminished numbers may be found, nor are they disposed in any orderly series, nor generated from any certain end, and hence they have a great similitude to the vices, which are numerous, inordinate, and indefinite. This is the kind of philosophy that I love, where it's like, by analysis of the laws of nature, then that you can derive these truths. So, the table of the 10 numbers. I was thinking that this was based on I thought there was a picture. So, the table of the 10 numbers. This is also, we were talking about the tetractys before. Let's look at a tetractys. So a tetractys is the 10 points. This was considered by the Pythagoreans to be the diagram of the universe, basically, or it has everything. It has all powers of the universe somehow reflected in it. The interesting thing is how similar this concept is to the Kabbalistic tree of life, the Etz Chaim, which you can see here. They're drawing that parallel. And you can also see that in some cases, like this, they're arranging the tetragrammaton, Yod He Wah He, which we were talking about earlier, into the tetractys. And by doing this, they derive the number 72. And we were talking about this earlier in this chapter, that the number 72 is of particular importance in Kabbalah because precisely of this. So once again, let me highlight this. Pythagoras was from the Holy Land, essentially. He was from Samos, which is, I think we looked it up, and I think it's in modern days. It's in the very south of Lebanon, or it's in the very northwest of Israel. But he was essentially born into the tradition there. Pythagoras was Greek by culture, and in the Greek world he taught and established his school later in a Ionian colony in Italy called Crotona. But he studied in Egypt and in the Holy Land and in the lands maybe of Babylon and Chaldea. So he studied around. We went over it in the last chapter. He studied quite extensively, but he must have had exposure to Hebrew. And so the teachings of Kabbalah and Pythagoras are very, very closely related. And in this case, we see a Kabbalistic version of this figure. But in truth, we have many, many ways in which it lines up with Kabbalah. Essentially, they are the same. Essentially, they're two different routes that the same culture of wisdom took. So Pythagoras is very important in Kabbalah too, and if you go back to a lot of the early texts, it's very clear that he had great influence on a lot of people. But he also wasn't the first, I don't think. I think that he derived these theories from the same sources that Kabbalah derives them from, which is namely sources from ancient Israel and Palestine, sources from the Holy Land. And these things were also later, like I was saying, adopted by many of the Islamic philosophers. And so philosophers in the Islamic Golden Age would talk about Plato, and they would talk about Pythagoras all the time. And they were talking about this stuff. And so a lot of the books in Arabic that are on occult topics will be about this kind of thing, and about philosophy, mathematics, and all of these things that are kind of Pythagorean in nature. So the following outline of numbers is a paraphrase of the writings of Nicomachus, Theon of Smyrna, Proclus, Porphyry, Plutarch, Clement of Alexandria, Aristotle, and other early authorities. The monad, the one, is so called because it remains always in the same condition, that is, separate from multitude. Its attributes are as follows. It is called mind because the mind is stable and has preeminence. That in Greek would be nous, or it could be logos, but probably nous. Nous means the mind and is often related to Jesus. Like in the beginning was the word, in the beginning was logos. Logos is a related concept to nous, but not exactly the same. So it is called mind because the mind is stable and has preeminence. Hermaphrodism because it is both male and female. Odd and even, for being added to the even it makes odd, and to the odd it makes even. It is called God because it is the beginning and end of all, but itself has neither beginning nor end. It is called good, for such is the nature of God. The receptacle of matter because it produces the duad, which is essentially material. So this is a very important theological concept that is used. I mean, it's used in Judaism, it's used in Christianity, and it's used in Islam, and it was an important pagan idea too prior to all that. But monadism, or the belief in a monad among the pagans, would be called today soft polytheism, meaning that the various gods with a lowercase g, Zeus, Athena, Artemis, Apollo, these kind of gods, they're characters or masks, the same way that human beings are masks or characters that the divine puts on. But the divine itself is only one, the monad. And that idea is very common in ancient Greek philosophy, but was a very influential idea in monotheistic religions. And of course, this is why, for example, you'll find Muslims will argue with Christians, saying that Christians are polytheists because they believe in the Trinity. But Christians will say they're not, because the Trinity is actually only one. It's just expressed in three. And it represents, in that sense, a kind of divine mystery. That divine mystery is derived from Pythagorean thinking, and even the thinking of later on Plotinus and the Neoplatonics. So by the Pythagoreans, monad was called chaos, obscurity, chasm, Tartarus, Styx, abyss, Lethe, Atlas, axis, Morpho, a name for Venus, and tower or throne of Jupiter, because of the great power which abides in the center of the universe and controls the circular motion of the planets around itself. Well, and of course Jupiter, the name Jupiter, Jupiter is from Jew pater, which means God the Father, or it could be because J. So there's a bit of a division here in the way that the etymology is looked at. So in the etymology through Proto-Indo-European is the same etymology of Jew that gave the French the word Dieu, and gave Dios to Spanish, gave Deus to Latin, gave Theo to Greek, gave Zeus to Greek. That Dieu pater would mean God the Father, and but there's another one that's seen in the name Jove, which, if you pronounce Jove in the old Latin way, is pronounced Yahweh, and Yahweh is Yahweh. So Eupater could also be Yah Pater, meaning Yah the Father, Yahweh the Father. So there's some connections here that are very interesting, and actually the Roman adoption of Christianity is almost something that should be regarded with some degree of suspicion, because the religion of Sol Invictus and the enthronement of the emperor as God kind of prefaced this adoption of Christianity, wherein Constantine and later Justinian especially, and Theodosius, and there were various emperors that took advantage of Christian philosophy in order to integrate and legitimize their rule. Constantine, of course, saw the sign of the cross in the sky and received the words "In hoc signo vinces," in this sign conquer, and so he did so. He conquered under the sign of the cross. The councils of Nicaea and of Chalcedon and so on were done almost always at the request of the Roman or Byzantine emperor, specifically the emperor. The first council of Nicaea was in the 4th century, I believe, and it was at the demand of Constantine, who demanded that these things be settled so that they not divide the empire. So Jupiter, as Yah the Father, it may be something that bears connection. And if you look at, for example, the statue of Moses, the famous statue of Moses, I believe it was it a Michelangelo? It was a famous statue of Moses where Moses is shown as having horns, which in Latin is cornuta, and in the Vulgate it says that when Moses descended from the mountain, he had horns, or he had a corona, meaning a bright radiance. So some people say that it meant that he had horns, literal like horns, which is what this statue shows. He has actual like horns, like goat horns, and in that sense, they are depicting Moses as kind of this pagan figure. This is a statue that's in Rome, and they give many of the characteristics of Saturn, the lawgiver, to Moses, and that's an interesting little rabbit hole to jump down. I recommend that you take some time to look at that. So, monad is also called germinal reason because it is the origin of all the thoughts in the universe. Other names, that would be the logos. Germinal reason is the logos. So monad is called logos, like in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Other names given to it were Apollo, because of its relation to the sun, which we've talked about Jesus being related to Apollo in I believe chapter 7 was about the sun, the universal deity, and has a picture of Apollo, which looks very, very similar to frescoes of Jesus. Go and take a look at that. Also called Prometheus because he brought man light, which is also something said about Jesus, and also the god Enki, is that Jesus was the one who gave mankind fire. Enki is the one who gave mankind fire, and Jesus is sometimes associated with Enki. And Prometheus, for this reason also, Jesus is sometimes called Lucifer in Latin. He's not being called Lucifer as in Satan. He's being called Lucifer as in the literal word Lucifer, meaning the bringer of light. In that way, he's also called Stellum Matutina, which means the morning star, which are also epithets that are used sometimes for Satan and the devil. Prometheus and Enki are also sometimes seen as being related to Lucifer, or the devil, the adversary, because he brought false light to man, or he brought fire to man. It's also called Pyralios because one who exists in fire. Geniture because without it, no number can exist. Substance because substance is primary, cause of truth, and constitution of symphony. And all these because it is the primordial one. Between greater and lesser, the monad is equal. Between intention and remission, it is middle. In multitude, it is mean, and in time, it is now, because eternity knows neither past nor future. It is called Jupiter because he is father and head of the gods. Vesta, the fire of the home, because it is located in the midst of the universe and remains there inclining to no side as a dot in a circle. Form, because it circumscribes, comprehends, and terminates. Love, concord, and piety, because it is indivisible. Other symbolic names for the monad are ship, chariot, Proteus, a god capable of changing his form, Memnosine, and Polyonymous, having many names. Just like Allah is said to be one and to have many names, 99 names, or an infinite number. The following symbolic names were given to the duad, the number 2, because it has been divided, and it is 2 rather than 1. And when there are 2, each is opposed to the other. So it is called genius, evil, darkness, inequality, instability, movability, boldness, fortitude, contention, matter, dissimilarity, partition between multitude and monad, defect, shapelessness, indefiniteness, indeterminateness, harmony, tolerance, root, feet of fountain aboding idea, top, phanes, opinion, fallacy, alterity, diffidence, impulse, death, motion, generation, mutation, division, longitude, augmentation, composition, communion, misfortune, sustentation, imposition, marriage, soul, and science. So you can tell that that is a very, very broad definition, and that's because 2, the duality, is the multitude coming into being. So it has the oneness is spreading in 2 directions, or in all directions. In his book Numbers, W. Wynne Westcott says of the duad, it was called audacity from it being the earliest number to separate itself from the divine one, and from editum of God nor silence, as the Chaldean oracles say. As the monad is the father, so the duad is the mother. Therefore, the duad has certain points in common with the goddesses Isis, Rhea, who's Yahweh's mother, Phrygia, Lydia, Dindymene, Sibyl, and Ceres. Erato, one of the muses, Diana, because the moon is forked, Dictina, Venus also because you can see Venus as a crescent as well, sometimes. Dione, Cytherea, Juno, because she is both wife and sister of Jupiter, and Maya, the mother of Mercury. Actually, an interesting thing is, when I do my work with I Ching, I did a little I Ching chart the other day in my little workbook here. So if you can see, let me see if I can pull this video up. Okay, so this is Yang in I Ching, this one line, and these 2 lines, this is Yin. So 1, 2. Of them, they're sorted, and one becomes either something super masculine or something that's more feminine masculine. Then feminine becomes more masculine feminine and very feminine feminine. And then that is further split into more and more masculine or feminine as you go down these branches. This is how I Ching is constructed. And basically, the figure of the Merkaba is a figure that is showing the upward rising male force and the downward descending female force. That's what also the female is divided so that something can enter into it. And the male is divided because it holds things up or holds them down. That's just, male nature is to be rigid and female nature is to be yielding. That's, I guess that's one of those deep lessons of that's maybe even embedded in our arithmetic. Yes. Hello to Brad and to Sheriff Dwayne. Just saying hi to people on my YouTube chat. Yes, Brad from Earth says, I feel much of organized religion was pulling away from the connection man had to divine nature, thus fighting paganism. I think in some sense you're right, but I also think that what's going on a lot of the time is that there's a division in religion between the esoteric and the exoteric. And the exoteric part of religions, the outer part of a religion, is usually structured to placate masses. And then the inner, the esoteric part of a religion usually contains the core secrets and the teachings, which tend to be mostly the same no matter what religion you're talking about. The esoteric parts of religions overlap largely a lot more than the exoteric parts of religions. And so I don't necessarily see our modern religions as being any worse, and for that matter, any better than ancient paganisms. They're basically similar. And if you were to go back to ancient Greece, for example, and to take part in pagan rituals there, I think that you would find the same division between esoteric and exoteric that we're talking about today. So if you go into the high halls of the Vatican and you're talking behind closed doors with people who are ordained to the priesthood and who are perhaps Jesuits or of other monastic orders, what their conversations may be about are much more esoteric than what is publicly discussed. But if you look at the what's publicly discussed, then I think you would find that ancient paganisms involved a lot of animal sacrifice and things that were just rituals that people didn't really understand. Just kind of like today, if you go to a lot of Catholic churches, I'm just using Catholics as an example, but if you go into a Roman Catholic church today, probably the majority of people that are sitting in the room, they even know that they were baptized and they take communion and they do all these things. Their knowledge of the esoteric side of things is probably not great. And so their knowledge of the rituals has more to do with observing them than it does with understanding them. And so most religions today just follow that same pattern pretty closely, which is to say that there's an inner group and an outer group. In Islam, you'll see it between scholars and just laymen, or you would see it between Sufis and even more Salafi scholars, where the Sufis have a very mystical teaching that involves initiation. And if you'd see that in like Tibetan Buddhism, there are lay people who are Buddhists, but they tend more toward the shamanic Bonpo side. And then there are the monks who will study for decades texts that only exist in a few copies. I mean, there's some things that they just don't talk about, or they just won't talk about with people because they're considered to be secret teachings that are too sensitive for the public to have access to. So in order to get to the core of almost any religion at almost any time in human society, it's necessary to go through this process of penetrating into the inner circle and coming to gradually transform blind observance of rituals into a powerful knowledge of rituals or understanding of the rituals and why this is the ritual. For example, in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, in which I'm ordained to the Aaronic priesthood, there are what I've done in basically the priesthood calling of the Aaronic priesthood within that church is to bless and pass the sacrament. That's what I mean, and baptize people. So I baptized one person. I've baptized more than one, but I've baptized one person into the church. But then mostly what you do is bless and pass the sacrament. And there's a lot of details of understanding what the purpose of different things of the sacrament is. The sacrament's very similar in most religions, but it's like the ancient Dionysian mystery, which is that God, the beautiful god Bacchus or Dionysus, was divided into many parts. And then his many parts were separated, and the followers have to consume them in order that the god may be reconstituted in the body of believers. And so Paul, the Apostle Paul, says all people are members in the body of Christ, and he has people take the sacrament, which is to eat the body and blood, drink the blood of Christ. Essentially, it's the ancient Dionysian mystery of drinking wine and eating something symbolic of the body of the god Dionysus in order to, or Bacchus, to reassemble that god within the body of the followers. And that's the same thing that's being done in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or any Christian church where they take the sacrament. They're doing that pretty much the exact same pagan ritual. They just it's just that the symbolism has changed over time. So I don't feel that these truths are any more restricted today than they were back then. In fact, I think that they're probably much more available than ever, because we have such good access to books, and we have such good access to information on the internet. Anyway, to get back to this, the monad being the symbol of wisdom, the duad is then seen as being the symbol of ignorance. And a lot of people get tied up in these, in positive and negative being tied to masculine and feminine energies, because it's like it's saying feminine is bad, but it really has there's no judgment. I mean, you can, there's no actual judgment in it. It's just a statement of opposites. So each pair of opposites is assigned to one or the other, and for almost everything, you could make an argument that one thing it can be described as either one, and in that sense, you find kind of a quantum superposition in things, which we've talked about it somewhat. I'm going to be putting out a book on, or not a. I'm going to be putting out a video on I Ching soon on the Book of Changes to explain some of this stuff just about the Chinese system of numerology and the Chinese system of divination. That will be coming out soon, hopefully within the next week, couple weeks, 2 weeks. That video will only be, it will be a short video, I think. Well, I mean, 20 minutes, a half hour. Not everything has to be these marathon lectures, but I do like doing them. So I hope you like them too. So while the monad is the symbol of wisdom, the duad is the symbol of ignorance, as in the symbol of the veil falling on you as you separate things. For in it exists the sense of separateness, which is the sense of the beginning of ignorance. The duad, however, is also the mother of wisdom, for ignorance, out of the nature of itself, invariably gives birth to wisdom. That's what I'm saying. It's not, when it says something like this, we shouldn't take it as something negative, like saying that women are the duad and therefore they're ignorant, and because then they're also the mother of wisdom. There's all kinds of symbols that are in these, and you can't get too caught up in superficial readings and superficial relations. The Pythagoreans revered the monad, but despised the duad because it was the symbol of polarity. By the power of the duad, the deep was created in contradistinction to the heavens. The deep mirrored the heavens and became the symbol of illusion, for the below was merely a reflection of the above. The below was called Maya, the illusion, the sea, the great void. And to symbolize it, the Magi of Persia carried mirrors. From the duad arose disputes and contentions, until by bringing the monad between the duad, equilibrium was reestablished by the Savior God, who took upon himself the form of a number and was crucified between two thieves. The triad, the number 3, was crucified between two thieves for the sins of men. So that I think that it's leading this to the form of a number being the Trinity would be the 1 plus the 2. The triad is the first number actually odd. The monad is not always being considered a number. It is the first equilibrium of unities. Therefore, Pythagoras said that Apollo gave oracles from a tripod and advised you to offer libation 3 times to the god or the oracle of Apollo. The key words to the qualities of the triad are friendship, peace, justice, prudence, piety, temperance, and virtue. It does sound like Jesus. The following deities partake of the principles of the triad. Saturn, the ruler of time. See, that's an interesting one too. We were talking about Saturn a bit earlier. Associating Saturn with Jesus is not that common to see, but the cross is an unraveled cube. So if the Saturn is the cube, then Jesus would be the cube unraveled. Latona, cornucopia, Ophion, the great serpent, which is held up by Ophiuchus, the serpent holder. Thetis, Hecate, Polyhymnia, a muse, many songs. Pluto, Triton, president of the sea. Tritogenia, Oculus, and the faces, furies, and graces. The number is called wisdom because men organize the present, foresee the future, and benefit by the experiences of the past. Sometimes there's some weird typos in this particular document. It is a cause of wisdom and understanding. The triad is the number of knowledge, music, geometry, and astronomy, and the science of the celestials and terrestrials. Pythagoras taught that the cube of this number had the power of the lunar circle. So the number 27 has the power of... So the number 27 would have the power of the lunar circle, I guess because it's similar to the orbital period. But the orbital period of the moon is 29.5. I think it's 29.5 days. I wonder if that's what it's saying. The sacredness of the triad and its symbol, the triangle, is derived from the fact that it is made up of the monad and the duad. That is the union of the one with the eternal virgin, the two, the divine feminine, the divine father, and the duad of the great mother. The triad, being made of these two, is therefore androgynous and is symbolic of the fact that God gave birth to his worlds out of himself, who in his creative aspect is always symbolized by the triangle. The monad, passing into the duad, was thus capable of becoming the parent of progeny, for the duad was the womb of Meru. Meru is the name of the world. Sumeru is the mountain of the world in Sanskrit. Within which the world, so within the womb of Meru, within which the world was incubated, and within which it still exists in embryo. Brad from Earth asks, would it be fair to suggest some of these traditions began to acknowledge cosmic cycles, solar cycles? Absolutely. I mean, essentially that is what all of this is about, I think. I think it all is essentially, I think most religions are essentially a solar, lunar, zodiac-based astrological religion that predated the flood. And that information is passed down, and it's actually, there's many things in the Bible, for example, that indicate that this knowledge is in there, but it's buried. There's many symbols that I discuss in my chapter on the zodiac and its signs. If you just look on the other Secret Teachings of All Ages videos on this channel, the zodiac and its signs talks about the astrological symbolism that is within the cosmic cycles that would be the cosmic cycles and solar cycles that inform all of these religions. And definitely Pythagoreanism was had astronomy as a big part of it, and astrology was well understood by the Chaldeans and other of the mystery traditions that Pythagoras was inducted into. And he also says that he's very glad we put these together. Thank you, and you are welcome, sir. I'm happy to do so. Returning to this, we return to the tetrad, which is the number 4. The tetrad was esteemed by the Pythagoreans as the primogenial number, which is the root of all things, the fountain of nature, and the most perfect number. All tetrads are intellectual. They have an emergent order and encircle the world as the Empyrean passes through it. Why the Pythagoreans express God as a tetrad is explained in a sacred discourse ascribed to Pythagoras, wherein God is called the number of numbers. And also just keep in mind that that YHVH, or the tetragrammaton, is a tetrad. That would be this figure here, the Jewish tetragrammaton. The name of God is the number 4, or as we saw before, it's the number 26, but it's in Gematria, but it's made of 4 letters. That's why it's called the tetragrammaton, meaning 4 letters. It's a tetragram. So this is called the number of numbers because the decad, or 10, is composed of 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4. The number 4 is symbolic of God because it is symbolic of the first 4 numbers. Moreover, the tetrad is the center of the week, being halfway between 1 and 7. And that's why it's Woden's Day, the day of the king of the gods. So you start on Sunday and you go to Saturday. So Woden's Day is the 4th day. That's why it's Odin's Day. The tetrad is also the first geometric solid. And also, the 4 corners, like when I'm reading tarot cards, the number 4 in tarot is usually something symbolic of the 4 elements. The 4 corners of the earth, north, south, east, west, or the 4 winds. Therefore, it represents everything spread out. And in my opinion, it represents God in the material sense. Whereas 1 represents God the Father, 2 represents God the Mother, 3 represents God the Son, 4 would be representing the world, the manifest world, which is the God made manifest. And all of them make the number 10 when added together, which is 1 returning to 0. The number, moreover, so Pythagoras maintained that the soul of man consists of a tetrad, the 4 powers of the soul being mind, science, opinion, and sense. The tetrad connects all beings, elements, numbers, and seasons, nor can anything be named which does not depend upon the tetractys. Which is that figure we saw before, the 10 numbers in that order, and the 1, 2, 3, 4, which is the 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, the tetractys, which is where we saw that name of God written that way. This tetragrammaton tetractys. This is showing 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 as the tetragrammaton. So, returning, it is the cause and the maker of all things, the intelligible God, author of celestial and sensible good. Plutarch interprets this tetractys, which he said was also called the world, to be 36, consisting of the first 4 odd numbers added to the first 4 even numbers. Thus, 1 plus 3 plus 5 plus 7 equals 16, 2 plus 4 plus 6 plus 8 is 20, 16 plus 20 is 36. Interestingly, the pyramid is the tetrad, the base of the tetrad, upon which stands the Trinity. the triangles go up to the 1 point. So 1 is on top of 3 and on a base of 4. And you could say that the base of 4 and the 1, that's the duad. That's the poles pulling apart from each other. The duality is that there's one and many, and those are the two pulling apart. And in doing so, they create the triangles, the 3. So 1 plus 2 makes 3, and they radiate out to the 4 corners. So the intelligible world is like a pyramid. And in the shape of the tetractys is also sometimes seen as being not a triangle, but a pyramid, or representative somehow of the pyramid. Keywords given to the tetrad are impetuosity, strength, virility, the two-mothered, and the key keeper of nature, because the universal constitution cannot be without it. It is also called harmony and the first profundity. The following deities partook of the nature of the tetrad: Hercules, Mercury, Vulcan, Bacchus, and Urania, one of the muses. The triad represents the primary colors and the major planets, while the tetrad represents the secondary colors and the minor planets, and together they make the 7. From the first triangle come forth the 7 spirits, symbolized by a triangle and a square. These together form the Masonic apron, or like we were saying, the pyramid. The 7 being the root of, like a musical scale, when you have a musical scale. And then the 8th is just a return. So the musical scale, it's just those 7 notes in different combinations. So that's everything in life, basically, is just a combination of the 7 astrological forces, which are the 2 lights, and the 5 planetes, the 5 wanderers. They were all considered wanderers because the sun and the moon wander through the sky, and so do Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. That's where we were talking about earlier, geometry, astronomy, music, and arithmetic all being related and being basically the tetrad of knowledge. The more you know. The pentad, which is the number 5, is the union of an odd and an even number, the numbers 3 and 2. Among the Greeks, the pentagram was a sacred symbol of light, health, and vitality. It also symbolized the 5th element, ether, because it is free from the disturbances of the 4 lower elements. It is called equilibrium because it divides the perfect number 10 into 2 equal parts. The pentad is symbolic of nature, for when multiplied by itself, it returns into itself, just as grains of wheat, starting in the form of seed, pass through nature's processes and reproduce the seed of the wheat as the ultimate form of their own growth. Other numbers multiplied by themselves produce other numbers, but only 5 and 6 multiplied by themselves represent and retain their original number as the last figure in their products. So 5 times 5 is 25, and 6 times 6 is 36. So they remain in their end. That's interesting. Life growing, you could say it's like male and female come together, 5 times 5. And then when they produce 25, there's 2, and then a new 5. That they become the 2 set aside from the 5. It's interesting. The pentad represents all the superior and inferior beings. It is sometimes referred to as the Hierophant, or the priest of the mysteries, because of its connection with the spiritual ethers. I think it's the Major Arcana card number 5 in the tarot is the Hierophant. I don't know that I'm just going to sit here and go through the whole tarot deck, but I guess if I already started, I might as well. But the Hierophant, I think it's number 5. High Priestess. So it goes Magician, High Priestess, Empress, Emperor, Hierophant, I think. The Emperor, number 4. The Empress, number 3. The Hierophant, number 5. So that's interesting. It's called the Hierophant, which is the Pope. The Pope is the Hierophant. Or you could also say that a patriarch, of the Eastern Orthodox Patriarchate, is a kind of Hierophant, a holy leader. So, returning to this, let's see. Yeah, it is sometimes referred to as the Hierophant, or the priest of the mysteries, because of its connection with the spiritual ethers, by means of which mystic development is attained. Key words of the Pentad are reconciliation, alternation, marriage, immortality, cordiality, providence, and sound. Actually, you know what? Each one of the tarot cards of the major arcana corresponds then to one of these. One is the magician, that is the energy of the monad giving forth to things. The second is the high priestess. She is the duad, accepting energy in and giving birth to all things. Then the 3 comes forth. In this case, I guess it's the Empress. Of course, it was saying that the 3 is androgynous, but the Empress represents a kind of inner ruler of a realm. And 4, being the manifest of God, is the Emperor, representing the outer ruler of a realm. Then the 5 is the Hierophant, representing the mystery priest. We have there's a video that I have up on the meanings of the major arcana already, but I don't know that I got into those particular meanings there. So that's interesting to me. So, keywords of the Pentad are reconciliation, alternation, marriage, immortality, cordiality, providence, and sound. Among the deities who partook of the nature of the Pentad were Pallas Athena, I guess, Nemesis, Bubastia, which Bast, Venus, Androgynia, Cytherea, and the messengers of Jupiter. The tetrad of elements plus the monad equals the Pentad. The Pythagoreans taught that the elements of earth, fire, air, and water were permeated by a substance called ether, the basis of vitality and life. Therefore, they chose the 5-pointed star, or pentagram, as the symbol of vitality, health, and interpenetration. It was customary for the philosophers to conceal the element of earth under the symbol of a dragon. And many of the heroes of antiquity were told to go forth and slay the dragon. Hence, they drove their sword, which is the monad, into the body of the dragon, which is the tetrad. This resulted in the formation of the pentad, a symbol of the victory of the spiritual nature over the material nature. The 4 elements are symbolized in the early biblical writings as the 4 rivers that poured out of the Garden of Eden. The elements themselves are under the control of the composite cherubim of Ezekiel. The Pythagoreans held the hexad, the number 6, to represent, as Clement of Alexandria conceived, the creation of the world according to both the prophets and the ancient mysteries. It was called by the Pythagoreans the perfection of all the parts. The number was particularly sacred to Orpheus and also to the fate Lachesis and the muse Thalia. It was called the form of forms, the articulation of the universe, and the maker of the soul. Among the Greeks, harmony and the soul were considered to be similar in nature, because all souls are harmonic. The hexad is also the symbol of marriage, because it is formed in the union of 2 triangles, one masculine and the other feminine. Among the keywords given to the hexad are time, for it is the measure of duration, panacea, because health is equilibrium, and the hexad is a balanced number. I always think of the number 6 as being like two triads, meaning it looks like a pair of scales. A pair of triangles next to each other is like a pair of scales. The world, it is also called the world because the world, like the hexad, is often seen to consist of contraries in harmony. Omnisufficient because its parts are sufficient for totality. 1 plus 2 plus 3 equals 6. Unwearied because it contains the elements of immortality. By the Pythagoreans, the heptad, the number 7, was called worthy of veneration. It was held to be the number of religion, because man is controlled by 7 celestial spirits, by whom it is proper for him to make offerings. It was called the number of life, because it was believed that human creatures born in the 7th month of embryonic life usually lived, but those born in the 8th month often died. One author called it the motherless virgin, Minerva, because it was not born of a mother, but out of the crown, or the head of the father, the monad. Keywords of the heptad are fortune, occasion, custody, control, government, judgment, dreams, voices, sounds, and that which leads all things to their end. Deities whose attributes were expressed by the heptad were Aegis, Osiris, Mars, and Clio, one of the muses. When you're reading this, think about what I was saying about the number 7 being like the pyramid, and it represents control, government, also that which leads all things to their end. So naturally, you'd want to be buried in a pyramid. And on the back of the dollar, there's a pyramid which symbolizes the government and its control and its power of judgment. Among many ancient nations, the heptad is a sacred number. The Elohim of the Jews were supposedly 7 in number. Some people say there were 10. People argue about the number of Elohim, or even if there were any numbers of them. They were the spirits of the dawn, more commonly known as the archangels controlling the planets. The 7 archangels, with the 3 spirits controlling the sun in its threefold aspect, constitute the 10, the sacred Pythagorean decad. Well, that's what I meant by some people say there's 10, because the 10, the number 10, the 3 gods of the Triad, or the Godhead, the Father, Son, Holy Ghost, or Father, Mother, Son, they are also El. So they're also Elo. So they could be confused. They can be combined as Elohim, because Elohim is plural gods, meaning gods. It also can mean the powers of creation. So like in Genesis 1, the name Elohim is mentioned 32 times. So some people say that there are 10 Elohim, but Elohim only says something 10 times. So some people say there are 10 Elohim. Some people say there's only one Elohim, and that Elohim is just plural because of the plural we, using the majestic we, which I always thought was an interesting concept. So Osiris being related to the number 7 and being related to the pyramid is also of note. Some people would look into Mars being related as also being of note. I don't know. You could ask what's his name from the Enterprise mission, Richard Hoagland. The mysterious Pythagorean tetractys, or 4 rows of dots, increasing from 1 to 4, was symbolic of the stages of creation. The great Pythagorean truth that all things in nature are regenerated through the decad, or 10, is subtly preserved in Freemasonry through these grips being affected by the uniting of 10 fingers, 5 on each hand of each person. The 3, spirit, mind, and soul, descend into the 4, the world, the sum being the 7, or the mystic nature of man, consisting of a 3-fold spiritual body and a 4-fold material form. These are symbolized by the cube, which has 6 surfaces and a mysterious 7th point within. The 6 surfaces are the directions: north, east, south, west, up and down, or front, back, right, left, above and below, or again, earth, fire, air, water, spirit, and matter. In the midst of these stands the One, which is the upright figure of man, from whose center in the cube radiate 6 pyramids. From this comes the great occult axiom: the center is the father of the directions, the dimensions, and the distances. The heptad is the number of the law because it is the number of the makers of cosmic law, the 7 spirits before the throne. The ogdoad, the number 8, was sacred because it was the number of the first cube, which in form has 8 corners, and was the only evenly even number under 10, 1 plus 2 plus 4 plus 8. Or 1, 2, 4, 8, 4, 2, 1. Thus, the 8 is divided into 2 4s. Each 4 is divided into 2 2s, and each 2 is divided into 2 1s, thereby reestablishing the monad. Among the keywords of the Ogdoad are love, counsel, prudence, law, and convenience. Among the divinities partaking of its nature are Panharmonia, Rhea, Cybele, Cadmea, Dindymene, Orchia, Neptune, Themis, and Euterpe, a muse. The Ogdoad was a mysterious number associated with the Eleusinian mysteries of Greece and the Kabiri. It was called the Little Holy Number. It derived its form partly from the twisted snakes on the caduceus of Hermes, and partly from the serpentine motion of the celestial bodies, possibly also from the moon's nodes. The Ennead, which is the number 9, was the first square of an odd number, 3 times 3. It was associated with failure and shortcoming because it fell short of the perfect number 10 by 1. It was called the number of man because of the 9 months of his embryonic life. Among its keywords are ocean and horizon, because to the ancients these were boundless. The Ennead is the limitless number because there is nothing beyond it but the infinite 10. 10 is the number 1 returning to 0. So there's no number greater than 9. The numbers go from 0 to 9, and then at the number 10, 1 returns to 0. Or you could say it rolls back to 0, and you just put a 1 in a different column, which had previously been 0. It was called boundary and limitation because it gathered all numbers within itself. It was called the sphere of the air because it surrounded the numbers as air surrounds the earth. Among the gods and goddesses who partook in greater or lesser degrees of its nature were Prometheus, Vulcan, Juno, the sister and wife of Jupiter, Paeon and Aglaea, Tritogenia, Curetes, Proserpine, Hyperion, and Terpsichore, who was a muse. The 9 was looked upon as evil because it was an inverted 6. According to the Eleusinian mysteries, it was the number of the spheres through which the consciousness passed on its way to birth. Because of its close resemblance to the spermatozoan, the 9 has been associated with germinal life. And note what it was saying earlier about the 144,000 being saved. 1 plus 4 plus 4 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0 is 9. And also the number of the beast, 666, is 18, which is 1 plus 8, which is 9. And so the saved and the beast have the same number, which is the number of a man, or man, which is the number of man, which is 9. So mankind is the beast, and mankind is also he who shall be saved. The decad, which is the number 10, according to the Pythagoreans, is the greatest of numbers, not only because it is the tetractys, the 10 dots, but because it comprehends all arithmetic and harmonic proportions. Pythagoras said that 10 is the nature of number, because all nations reckon to it, and when they arrive at it, they return to the monad. The decad was called both heaven and the world, because the former includes the latter. Being a perfect number, the decad was applied by the Pythagoreans to those things relating to age, power, faith, necessity, and the power of memory. It was also called unwearied because, like God, it was tireless. The Pythagoreans divided the heavenly bodies into 10 orders. They also stated that the decad perfected all numbers and comprehended within itself the nature of odd and even, moved and unmoved, good and ill. They associated its power with the following deities: Atlas, for it carried the numbers on its shoulders, Urania, Mnemosyne, the sun, Phanes, and the one God, because it was both 1 and 0. The decimal system can probably be traced back to the time when it was customary to reckon on the fingers, these being among the most primitive of calculating devices and still in use among many Aboriginal peoples. Also, the number 12 was important. My theory is that what they did is that they counted fists as 6, or palms somehow. So they would start It would be 0, there would be nothing. Then there would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then you could count up to 12 that way. Of course, there's some people who say, what is it, that you can count 1, 2, 3, 4 by counting on the joints of your fingers. You can count up to 12 on one hand. Some people say that that's the reason why they use the base 60 to base 60 / base 12 system in ancient Babylon. There's some evidence of ancient systems where they use base 20 because there are fingers and toes, but they're not very common. The base 10 is definitely the most common. I believe some African counting systems were of lower bases. I know I'd heard of at least one base 8 counting system that was historically in use. And I thought there was a base 8 counting system that was used in Asia that was based off of I Ching and the Bagua, which are the 8 trigrams. But that would basically be a binary system. It would actually be a binary system in a certain sense. Now we are wrapping that up, and the next chapter will be the human body and symbolism. And this is a pretty interesting chapter that gets into a lot of interesting stuff in terms of what we're looking at in the future. After that, we'll be looking at the Hieramic legend, which is the basic legend of Freemasonry. And after that, we'll get to the Pythagorean theory of music and color, which is one of my favorite topics as a musician and artist. And then we'll be getting into magical meanings of various animals, flowers, plants, fruits, and trees, stones, metals, and gems. We'll talk about ceremonial magic, the elements, hermetic pharmacology, Kabbalah, cosmology in that sense. We have a long way to go. We're about a third of the way through the book, I think. But it will it should work out in the end. So I'm just going to stick around for just a minute in case there are any questions, and I will just play some flute to let the stream catch up. But if there's no questions after that, I will go ahead and close for the day. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And join us back here soon. I'll be posting some shorter videos on specific topics and questions that people ask. So send me your questions if you want me to make a short video on it. And I'll be trying to keep those between 15, let's say 10 to 30 minutes, somewhere in that region. Other than that, I will be broadcasting. We'll have more Radio Free Transarctica coming up later in this week. My schedule has just been kind of weird, so stay tuned for that. I will be posting about it soon. We have some exciting guests coming up, and then we will be continuing the Secret Teachings of All Ages. I kind of just go at the pace. I'm trying to get into a schedule of doing it every Tuesday and Thursday, but I got sidetracked this week, so I'm going to
to try to get back into that schedule. So you guys have a great night and have a nice day.